Introduction. Risk is something we all think about at some point in life, whether we call it risk or not. We consider risk when choosing a job, beginning a relationship, moving to a new city, deciding whether to try something unknown, or even when we buy groceries. At first glance, risk might seem like something only extreme athletes, military soldiers, high-stake investors, or adventurers deal with. The popular image of risk tends to involve dramatic gestures, someone skydiving without a parachute, a daredevil speeding down a mountain, or a gambler betting it all on one roll of the dice. But the art of risk challenges this popular image. Kayt Sukel, a science writer, begins her exploration by admitting something surprising. She used to take risks freely, but as life became more predictable, caring for her child and managing responsibilities, she realized her own adventurous spirit had dimmed. She began to wonder what risk really was, why some people seem naturally drawn to it while others avoid it, and whether understanding risk better could help her, and all of us, live a fuller life. This book is not just about saying, take more risks, and it is not a simple thrill-seeker's manual. Instead, it is a deep investigation into the science, psychology, biology, and social context of risk-taking. It draws on research from neuroscience, genetics, psychology, and real stories from individuals who regularly face uncertainty, from climbers and surgeons to traders and soldiers. Throughout, Sukel shifts risk from something seen as daring or reckless to something deeply human, something embedded in everyday decisions and fundamental to growth, learning, and adaptation. Risk and the mind. What is risk really? One of the first questions Sukel tackles is deceptively simple. What is risk anyway? On the surface, people often think of risk as danger or potential loss. But risk isn't simply about danger, it's about uncertainty and consequence. Any choice that could lead to a negative outcome or a positive one involves risk. To understand this, Sukel invites us into the world of neuroscience, the field that studies how the brain works. At the heart of risk-taking is the decision-making system in our brain. This system constantly balances inputs from emotional centers, memory areas, and the logical planning parts of the brain. Some of these areas respond quickly and automatically, such as the instinct to pull your hand away from a flame. Others deliberate slowly, weighing long-term consequences. Our brain's risk calculator integrates all these signals. It attempts to estimate not only what might happen, but also how likely it is to happen and what it would feel like. This explains why two people can perceive the same situation differently. One sees adventure, the other sees danger. Risk is not purely subjective. It has measurable roots in brain chemistry, but it is not purely objective either. It's a blend of logic, emotion, instinct, and past experience. This interplay between emotion and logic helps explain why risk is not just something extreme or rare. Every time we decide what to eat, whether to say hello to someone, or whether to try something new at work, our brain is negotiating risk. Biology and risk, genes, age, and the brain. Sukel spends significant time unpacking how biology influences risk. Genes play a role in shaping our tendencies, but they do not determine them completely. Researchers have identified several gene variants associated with risk-related behaviors. For example, certain versions of a gene related to dopamine receptors are linked to novelty-seeking and exploratory behaviors. People with this variant may be more drawn to excitement and uncertainty. Another gene variant influences serotonin, a neurotransmitter involved in mood and inhibition, and is associated with risk aversion. However, having one gene variant does not lock someone into a particular behavior, it simply tilts the balance. Environment, upbringing, experience, and culture interact with genes to shape actual behavior. Age is another biological factor that influences how risk is experienced. Teenagers are often drawn to risky situations, and this is not just a cultural stereotype. During adolescence, the brain undergoes dramatic changes. Reward centers become more sensitive, emotions surge, and the parts of the brain responsible for self-control are still developing. This creates a biological environment where thrill, reward, and impulsiveness are amplified. In comparison, adults tend to have more refined impulse control and more experience to guide decisions, which often results in more measured approaches to risk. Neuroscience also shows that different networks in the brain handle different aspects of risk. Some circuits respond quickly and emotionally, signaling danger or reward almost instantly. Other circuits are involved in cautious thinking and deliberate planning. The balance between these circuits affects how we make choices. Sometimes we default to quick, instinctive reactions, and sometimes we slow down and think deeply before acting. This complex biological foundation shows that risk is neither good nor bad in itself. It is part of how the brain is wired to help us navigate an unpredictable world. Recognizing this helps demystify risk and makes it possible to approach it with awareness rather than fear. Gender and risk, breaking down stereotypes. One of the powerful insights in the book is how gender influences perceptions and experiences of risk, but not necessarily in the simplistic way most people assume. Traditionally, society has depicted men as more willing to take risks and women as more cautious. Some biological theories have linked testosterone levels with riskier behaviors, but Sukel shows that gender differences are not as clear-cut as stereotypes suggest. Social norms, cultural expectations, and opportunities available to individuals shape how risk is expressed in behavior. As women have gained access to more arenas historically dominated by men, researchers have found that women's risk-taking patterns change. When given the same training, information, and social support, women often take risks just as readily as men. This indicates that cultural and environmental factors are deeply intertwined with biological ones, and that risk behavior is not locked to gender. Understanding this helps dismantle simplistic views about who is naturally a risk taker and who is not. It shows that risk is a human experience, shaped by opportunity, encouragement, context, and personal goals, just as much as biology. Preparation and expertise, how risk takers think. One of the most important themes in The Art of Risk is that smart risk takers are not reckless. People often assume that those who embrace risk ignore caution, but research and real-world examples show the opposite. Whether it's a mountain climber, a poker player, a neurosurgeon, or a special forces operator, those who handle risk well are exceptionally good at preparation and planning. Preparation allows individuals to anticipate potential outcomes and plan for contingencies. For example, a climber does not simply scale a rock face without studying the route, checking weather conditions, and training for technical challenges. Similarly, a seasoned investor does not gamble without understanding probabilities, market conditions, and risk thresholds. Preparation does not eliminate risk, but it reduces uncertainty. It equips decision-makers with the tools to respond flexibly when situations change and unexpected obstacles arise. What emerges from Sukel's exploration is that expert risk-takers tend to break down situations into manageable pieces, weigh possible outcomes systematically rather than impulsively, practice skills until they become second nature, build mental models of how events are likely to unfold, prepare not only physically but psychologically for stress and uncertainty. In other words, risk competence is learned rather than purely innate. Connection. How social context shapes risk decisions. People do not make decisions in a vacuum. Our social environment, family, peers, community, culture, has a profound impact on how we perceive and respond to risk. The influence of others can change what feels risky or safe. If peers regularly engage in a behavior, such as extreme sports or entrepreneurial ventures, that behavior begins to feel more normal and less frightening. Conversely, if an environment is highly risk-averse, even small uncertainties can seem overwhelming. Early in life, family attitudes towards risk shape how children learn to view uncertainty. Supportive environments that encourage exploration and learning from failure tend to produce individuals more comfortable with uncertainty. Conversely, overly protective environments can leave people more fearful of change, even when the risk involved is small. Social connection also provides emotional support. Having trustworthy people around during risky times makes it easier to take thoughtful risks because the potential for failure feels less threatening when someone is there to help you cope and recover. Emotion and stress, the invisible forces in risk decisions. Fear is one of the primal emotional responses to risk. It alerts us to danger, focuses our attention, and triggers physiological changes to prepare us for action.
But fear can also be paralyzing if it overrides rational assessment. Skilled risk-takers learn not to suppress fear, but to use it as information. Fear tells us what we value most and where our boundaries lie. When balanced with logic and preparation, fear becomes a guide, not an enemy. Stress is another key factor. Moderate stress can sharpen focus and mobilize resources. Too much stress, however, can cloud judgment and lead to impulsive choices. Training for high-pressure situations often involves desensitizing the body's stress response so that challenging moments are less likely to trigger panic and more likely to engage thoughtful action. Failure and recovery, essential parts of the risk journey. No exploration of risk would be complete without talking about failure. Yet failure is rarely treated with respect in modern culture. Many people see failure as a mark of weakness, but Sukel shows that this perspective